Following reports that Dustborn received funding from the Norwegian Film Institute as well as the European Union, it's now been revealed that the U.S. State Department has funded at least one game to the tune of $250,000 explicitly for the purposes of propagandizing teenagers. Now, obviously, the State Department doesn't use that language, but they do describe the game as, quote, counter disinformation, a counter disinformation game. And they spent $275,000 on this game. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Now, I wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com, but this will be exclusive to members first. We'll have this going up live on the channel tomorrow, and it will be live on thatparkplace.com in the morning as well. But this is a members exclusive video. If you want to find more about memberships, just click the link below in the description, and we have a number of options for you to support the channel and get these early exclusives, an early look at these exclusives. So this was brought to my attention first by former World of Warcraft team lead Mark Kern. He shared that Dustborn was indeed funded by the Norwegian Film Institute to the tune of 14 million kroner, or nearly $1.4 million. He also shared that the game received 150,000 euros from the Creative EU grant program, and he accurately describes Dustborn as an Antifa simulator. That is what I have been describing it as well, and that's indeed what it looks like to me, and from what I've seen of all of people playing the game in their trailers as well. So, but following this report, we had another one from Craig Skistimas. Hope I'm saying that properly. Sorry, Craig. But he is also known as Stuttering Craig. He owns and hosts the Side Scrollers podcast. And he shared a screenshot of a U.S. State Department document or Department of State document indicating that they were funding a game for funding a counter disinformation game to the tune of $275,000. Now, this screenshot is from the Embassy of The Hague Public Affairs section of the U.S. Department of State. And that is right here. You can see this document right here. It's linked in the article. We'll go back to that and we'll read some of this article. We'll read some of what the document says. The U.S. Embassy of The Hague Public Affairs section announces an open competition for organizations to submit applications to produce an English and Dutch language pilot version of a counter disinformation game. Produce a French version of the game. Produce one additional translation into a European, Asian, and/or African language to be determined at a later date. Host the game on the company's own servers, and develop and implement data collection and analysis methodologies to demonstrate the project's achievement of expected results and promote games to target audiences. Please carefully follow all instructions below. He continues saying, digital games have proven to be an effective tool in building cognitive resistance to disinformation across diverse environments and cultural contexts. Of note, it does not provide any definition of what disinformation is or what they are actually trying to achieve other than to create cognitive resistance to disinformation. We'll find out later that it's literally just propaganda, and it is being used to try and indoctrinate teenagers into viewing any critics of government waste and government spending as people who are just pushing disinformation. That's what this is. This is literally government propaganda trying to paint its opponents as purveyors of disinformation. I'm not making this up. Literally not making this up. The U.S. Embassy in The Hague is accepting proposals for the development of a digital game that incorporates active inoculation theory along with other digital media literacy education methods in a fun, interactive experience targeting global internet users ages 15 and up. Primary gameplay should simulate the experience of engaging in common disinformation and propaganda activities while educating the user on digital literacy applicable in the real world. Successful proposals will incorporate active inoculation theory and address current disinformation and propaganda tactics. The delivered product should be modular, scalable, and expandable so that later iterations could address additional problem sets such as violent extremism and health misinformation. Remember, this is 2021. We're still in the middle of the COVID pandemic scare. The game will be piloted simultaneously with players in the United Kingdom and the Netherlands, and lessons learned from these pilots will inform the final version of the game intended ultimately for global audiences. So the game was indeed funded. We have this letter, which was written last year. It was penned by a number of congressmen, including Michael T. McCall, who's the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Brian Mast, Christopher Smith, Darrell Issa, Maria Elvira Salazar, Keith Self, Corey Mills, and Ken Buck. And they sent a letter to Secretary of State Anthony Blinken regarding the game and other issues related to the Global Engagement Center. This is the letter right here. You can see it to Anthony Blinken. And it mentions the game right here. It says in 2020, the GEC spent $275,000 producing a counter-disinformation video game that programmed audiences to associate citizen critiques of government waste, fraud, and abuse with a social media disinformation campaign. So they are very abundantly clear, indicating what this game was doing. It's literally propaganda. It has nothing to do with actually identifying disinformation. The game itself is disinformation and propaganda. And then in 2020, they actually produced a similar one. So this isn't the first one. They did one before this, explicitly targeting political misinformation, apparently modeled off the U.S. 2020 presidential election cycle. In the above counter-disinformation video games, the GEC selected and supported the University of Cambridge Social Decision-Making Lab, whose recent disinformation research includes targeting U.S. conservatives, targeting climate change deniers, targeting vaccine skeptics, targeting election deniers. And so the GEC is part of the State Department. It is this global, it's called the Global Engagement Center, and it is like a division of the United States Department of State. So you see what they're doing, who's doing all of this, what they do, and why would they be making this video game, one wonders. Why would they be funding this video game? Very interesting. These video games to the tune of at least $250,000. We got this report from Real Clear Policy, which identifies the game as Cat Park. And they discovered this game. Here's the Real Clear article, because there was a memo leaked, a State Department memo leaked, discussing what Cat Park is. And this is the memo on Scribd. And it says here, Cat Park inoculates players against real-world disinformation by showing how sensational headlines, memes, and manipulated media can be used to advance conspiracy theories and incite real-world violence. The game available now in English, Dutch, French, and Russian, with more language versions to come based on post requests, helps players discern between reliable and unreliable information. Clearly, it doesn't, because the entire game is a piece of propaganda. I wonder if people who play the game know that the game is propaganda. I wonder if they're able to discern that they're literally being propagandized by the game. So that is that memo. I'll have the link there in the article. I'll add that. And then there's also a toolkit here. We have a toolkit. So let's look at this toolkit. And the toolkit is right here that the State Department created as well. Obviously talks about the game, et cetera, et cetera. It's the key dates and all the social media and how they're going to market the game and everything. So screenshot there of some of what the game looks like. I'll show you a little bit more of it later. But what this says, what this toolkit says here, is that these are the priority messages that the game is about. Building media literacy skills is one of the tactics most recommended by experts for countering influence operations. So it's not about disinformation now. Influence operations. Influence operations. And this is pre-bunking, mis- and disinformation proactively through a game has proven more effective than reactive debunking, according to a growing body of academic and empirical research. So they're trying to basically indoctrinate people into just that can't be true. There's no way that that's true at all. You're a conspiracy theorist. You're just peddling disinformation. How could you say that? So they're literally trying to teach people to shut their brains off and just accept what the government tells them, rather than to be questioning why the government is spending money on a video game to propagandize teenagers. It also says here that in a study conducted by the University of Cambridge, people who play Harmony Square, which is that 2020 game, which was the prequel to Cat Park, find misinformation significantly less reliable after playing are significantly more confident in their assessment and are significantly less likely to report sharing misinformation. So again, they just literally are not, they just accept what the government tells them and move on. It's interesting that a lot of this is coming out after the COVID pandemic, right? Very interesting. No definition of misinformation. It does reveal that Dutch studio Tilt developed the game. And here's a little screenshot of the game. If you want to actually look at the game, it's right here. It's got a cat running across the windowsill there. From what I understand, you actually create disinformation throughout the game to try and shut down a cat park that the government is trying to spend. You eventually come to realize that what you've done is wrong. You repent of it. And then it's revealed that the person trying to get you to do all of this was a billionaire. And he was behind the scenes trying to peddle the disinformation. Makes one wonder what they thought was going to happen with X, as well as whether or not Donald Trump was going to run again for the presidency. Because I think it is definitely aimed at either one of them or possibly both. So let's look at Tilt here. This is the developer. Tilt seemingly came into existence in 2021 at the same time the State Department funded Cat Park. So here is their website. This is the Tilt website. I'm going to duplicate this real quick. We're going to go to their About section. You can see that they were they admit that they came about in 2021. See, in 2021, we started Tilt as a small team of counter disinformation warriors with nothing but a shared desire to disrupt the use of computational propaganda that was being used to shape public attitudes, polarize opinion, and reduce trust in our democratic processes. So you can see they were founded in 2021, and they just so happened to get a $275,000 check from the Department of State in 2021, the year they were founded, to make this game. What a coincidence. What a coincidence. And so this is what they sell some kind of hate speech detection tool. They admit that they're all part of the woke agenda. At Tilt, we believe the world should be a safe and inclusive place for everyone, regardless of race, religion, gender, or sexual orientation. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because the major world religions do not view sexual orientation as a protected class. As a Catholic, the Catechism of the Catholic Church makes it abundantly clear that homosexual activities are disordered and they can never be accepted. So doesn't really make a lot of sense. But anyways, they go on and provide their little definition here of hate speech. We define hate speech as abuse that is targeted at a protected group or at its members for being a part of that group. Protected groups are groups based on age, disability, gender identity, race, national or ethnic origins, religion, sex, or sexual orientation, which broadly reflects Western legal consensus, particularly the U.S. 1964 Civil Rights Act, the UK's 2010 Equality Act, and the EU's Charter of Fundamental Rights. So those are all three very different laws that have very different interpretations and are enforced very differently. So this is so broad, it basically means anything. And like I said, is me being a Catholic, believing in what the Catholic Church teaches, that homosexual activities are disordered and should never be accepted. Is that hate speech? Who knows? Probably is based on their definition here. I'm sure it probably is with the UK's 2010 Equality Act, one of those. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with those laws. I'm not even super familiar with the Civil Rights Act, but would not be surprised. I've seen reports of people literally getting arrested for praying. So over there in the UK and in Ireland, it's ridiculous. But anyways, this is the company that they hired or paid to develop this propaganda game. So clear company that is all about pushing the woke agenda and enforcing it through hate speech detection and policies. So that is Tilt. We also have this from a contractor for the U.S. State Department's Global Engagement Center, the GEC. His name is Davor Devchich. He basically reiterates what the leaked memo says. He did a video. It's posted to YouTube on September 2022, and it's to this YouTube channel, Games for Change, which looks like it's all about pushing the woke agenda. Like almost every video on there is pushing woke ideology. And he said this: Cat Park is based on research into the theory of active inoculation pioneered by University of Cambridge's social media decision-making lab. Much as vaccinations are intended to work by exposing subjects to an innocuous strain of a virus in order to trigger an immune response, empirical studies indicate that the controlled experience of disinformation through a game can build cognitive resistance to disinformation in the real world. This concept is also known as pre-bunking. We can leverage games like Cat Park to proactively educate ourselves about common disinformation techniques, so we can be better prepared to spot fake news no matter what form it takes. Interesting. Very interesting. What is even more interesting is the Foundation for Freedom Online's report that basically savages this entire game, this entire program, and indicates that it is indeed behavioral modification propaganda, that these are behavioral modification propaganda games intended to make young people around the world view populist content online as being de facto disinformation. The organization added, it is almost as if the government is using the video game of Cat Park to get young people to subliminally believe that opposing the government is only done by disinformation purveyors. How convenient for the government that this government-funded game has such a plot. And if you want to look at this, there's some really, really good research here by Mike Benz, who is a former State Department employee. He does a ton of information. You can see that he's got a lot of information here about Cat Park. He really goes into the game here. It says the major crux of plot tension in the game is the concern that the Cat Park being built by the city's mayor ostensibly only serves the city's upper income residents. Thus, populist resentment lurks within the lower income strata at the city, who believe their own needs are being neglected by government officials. Thus, a disinformation purveyor, the player, represents the anti-park movement and begins the game by generating grievances against the park's construction. And he shares a bunch of screenshots from the game. In case that's unclear, the generation of the news headlines below is framed as an evil act of disruptive populists engaged in a divisive campaign to disrupt the city's peace. So if you're actively engaging and campaigning against something that you don't want in the city, you think it's only benefiting a certain group and it's harming another group, that is bad. It's wrong. And he goes on and says, so right away, this government-funded game establishes a moral framework in which complaining about wasteful spending by government elites, spending which comes at the expense of improving city roads, objections of locals and our kids, is framed as spreading disinformation. It is almost as if the government is using the video game, which we just kind of went over, of Cat Park to get young people to subliminally believe that opposing the government is only done by disinformation purveyors. And it says here, this anti-populist, pro-establishmentarian theme of Cat Park permeates every scene in the game. For example, the player meets a zealous working-class citizen, Marvin, who runs a local hot dog stand and opposes the Cat Park's construction. Marvin instructs the player to create a cat conspiracy theory about elites in government or elites in corporations being behind the new project. The in-game exercise then has the player assign a deliberately false motive to the elites behind the Cat Park construction, making up a conspiracy about money or control. The point here is to subliminally train young people to associate social media posts alleging government corruption as being fake news, just like such claims are revealed to be fake news in Cat Park. The player in the game is first forced to make anti-government memes, then is ultimately forced by the plot to repent for the damage caused by making those memes. While in the role of a disinformation purveyor, the player is told to start a meme war and make sure to point out how ridiculous this Cat Park is. The disinformation memes the player makes include memes making allusions to the city's local government, acting like the party out of the dystopian novel 1984. This all has the effect of making challenges to corrupt government practices seem ridiculous and part of a fraudulent subversive campaign by disinformation spreaders. The 1984 irony of the government funding a dystopic cat-themed video game associating 1984 with censorable disinformation is, however, wholly lost on the GEC. To make the irony complete, this propaganda video game designed to create behavioral modification in young people so that they never believe conspiracy theories ends with a conspiracy theory against the other side. As it turns out, the entire disinformation campaign the player embarked on was all secretly planned by an eccentric billionaire organizing the city's populists from the shadows. It is this shady populist organizer figure who pushes the player to push the anti-park movement to the next level, which includes mobilizing a group of citizens to shut the park down. This reveal has the effect of making young people subtly associate social media posts expressing dissatisfaction with government with fraudulent AstroTurf billion-dollar operations rather than genuine citizens mobilizing for reform of corrupt government practices. So you can see how they are trying to use this game to propagandize people. And I don't think it's just this game. I think what's really interesting about this for me, my big takeaway, is that I think there are a whole bevy of video games that do this without even getting a cent from the government. I think, obviously, we're talking about Dustborn. They did get money from the EU. They did get money from the Norwegian Film Institute, but they were clearly trying to indoctrinate people into buying into an Antifa lifestyle. And like being Antifa is like a good thing. You want to censor people. You want to trigger people. You want to cancel them. You want to gaslight them, etc. Trying to show that it's something that is indeed a good thing. I think that there are other examples out there. I think Concord is another example. They do it a little bit more subtly, just the pronouns in the character descriptions, what their pronouns are, trying to get you to believe that transgender ideology is real. I harp on that in a number of my videos. I think this is evidence that the government clearly thinks that they can indeed massively influence and propagandize people into buying into a lot of this stuff. They're literally funding $250,000 games to propagandize people into doing it. If they didn't think it was effective, I don't think they would be spending money to do it unless they're doing some kind of money laundering scheme where they're just trying to put the money in the hands of the people that run Tilt, which is a possibility. But I think they actually believe this. I mean, they got this whole inoculation theory that the Foundation for Freedom Online goes into detail on. If you want to read it, I do have the link to this article in that Park Place article, where it goes into Cat Park, goes into their other game. That name escapes me right now. That they worked on as well. Harmony Square. There it is. It goes into this game, Harmony Square. This is the 2021 that they worked on. It was released in November 2020. So, but just to reiterate, I really do think that video games, movies, television, a lot of this is used as propaganda weapons against the public. The whole MCU stuff, I 100% believe they are trying to feminize the United States of America. They're trying to push that stuff. It's a humiliation ritual, but it is also a tool to propagandize. And it's also a tool to show, like, hey, we are in charge. We are the ones that have the power. My friend Brian Niemeyer talks about this all the time. You can easily do this. He doesn't even talk about inoculation theory. He literally just says, like, hey, you can sway the way people view the world by providing them with media that shows them how to act, with the protagonists, the heroes, acting in the way you want them to act. And Hollywood has been doing this for years. Video games are doing it now as well. But he says if we want people to act in virtuous, good ways, we need to start showing heroes acting in those ways. You need to start showing the hero doing the right thing. You don't want to have the hero, these morally gray heroes, these anti-heroes, etc., like just behaving absolutely awful. And so basically when they're behaving like this, they're trying to get you to behave like this, or they have them engaging in disordered behavior. So they're like, oh, this is something that it's a good thing that this hero is doing it. So that's okay. And I definitely feel like that has a massive, massive influence. And the government clearly thinks it does too, because they're funding games like this to have that influence. So I'm not crazy. The US government is literally spending $250,000 on a video game to literally do that, to propagandize youth into making them think a certain way. So this is basically the end of the report here. This stuff is just absolutely crazy. I never thought I would be doing a video like this and seeing that our government is actively involved in funding video games to propagandize teenagers into believing a certain worldview. But this is the world we live in, and this is why I have this channel, is to fight against this evil that is trying to destroy the truth, obfuscate the truth, because that is not what I am here to do. I'm here to find the truth, to seek the truth, and to hopefully bring others to the truth as well. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, but to always speak the truth.